There are moments in life that quietly or suddenly change everything. A diagnosis, a loss, a decision you didn't expect to make. And once that moment happens, the real question becomes, then what? Welcome to Change Happened, Then What? A storytelling podcast about the moments that shape us and the lives we build after them. Each episode brings you a real story told with honesty and care, where everything was questioned and where even then they chose to keep moving forward. This isn't an interview show. It's a place for real stories shared thoughtfully, sometimes messy, sometimes hopeful, but always human. I'm your host, Heather Holt, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin, I want to invite you into something I'm doing called the Changed Me Community Drawing. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out how you can enter into our monthly drawing for a super cozy Change Happened trucker hat or a super soft tee. Now, let's dive in. Before we get into today's show, I just want to take a moment to say thank you. This podcast is now being listened to in over 50 countries around the world, which is just wild to me. If you're new here, welcome. I'm really glad you've joined the community. And if you've been here since the beginning, thank you for still listening. And if these stories mean something to you, the best way to support the show is simple. Follow the podcast or share an episode with someone who you think might need it. Independent podcasts like this one only grow because of listeners like you. So truly, thank you for being a part of this dream with me. There are moments in life that feel too big to forget. Moments that reshape how we see the world, how we move through it, how we hold each other. COVID was one of those moments. We lived it together. We talked about it constantly, and then we didn't. And for Kenny Dupar, that silence didn't feel like closure. It felt like something unfinished.
The question is, why aren't we talking about this as a society? The pandemic and where I was in 2020. I went to Seattle land for a very, very good reason. A girl. She had a compromised immune system, and she had to leave abruptly because we didn't know in early 2020 what was going on. She took her dog. The lease was up. I got furloughed. I became a country song. Today, I live in East Tennessee, and I am...
Yeah, he does kind of sound like a country song. But here's the thing about Kenny. He has a way of telling a story that makes you laugh right before you realize there's more underneath of it. So before we jump too far ahead, before we land in the today of it all, we need to go back. Back to a different version of Kenny. Before the books, before the pandemic, before the questions. Back to Kenny.
30 years. I did 8 years active duty, 30 years altogether. That was in the Army Reserve. I had perfect attendance. I never missed a formation. I was so burnt out. That was 7 years ago. I retired, and in typical Army fashion, I'm still waiting for my retirement award.
Congratulations.
That's the thing about Kenny. He'll hand you something real and wrap it in humor before it ever feels heavy. It's not avoidance. It's how he makes sense of it. Because behind the joke, there's always a story. Kenny's first book, called Scoundrels in Iraq, is exactly that. Not a polished, button-up version of military life, but one that lives in the in-between moments. The kind of stories you don't always hear. The ones filled with chaos, questionable decisions, and a level of honesty that makes you laugh, while quietly realizing what it must have taken to live through it. Stories like Why I Stole a Bulldozer. Yeah, that one alone should tell you this isn't your typical war story. But for today, we're going to move forward to just before the world shut down. Kenny had already closed one chapter, retiring from the military after 30 years of service. But what came next, he didn't see coming. A pandemic, a layoff, and suddenly, no dog, no girlfriend, and apparently, no good dating options either. This is how he describes that time.
Dating at that time was ridiculous because they closed movie theaters, and it's like we were in a theater of the absurd because for 100 years a fella could take a girl to a dinner and a movie. I mean, this is bizarro world.
Bizarro world? That might be the best way to describe that time. A version of life that felt familiar but not quite right, where normal routines suddenly weren't normal anymore. And Kenny remembers it in detail, the things that quietly disappeared or didn't make sense at all. And maybe this is where his question starts to take shape, in the quietness of it all. And this is where Kenny really leans into it, because when he looks back, it's the details that don't quite add up. The rules, the shutdowns, the way everything changed almost instantly.
The 6 foot away rule. Who the hell made this shit up? Someone just totally made that. Someone said, if you sneeze, it goes about 6 feet at about 200 miles an hour. So we should all stand 6 feet away from each other. And someone said, that sounds great. And then the next thing you know, there's people putting tape on the floor at the convenience store. They're closing down the golf courses. And people went freaky because all of a sudden there was informers. Okay, you don't have to report on your neighbor because they had a party. Oh, yes, you do. It's my civic responsibility to keep everyone safe. Shutting down the churches. You needed a mask to enter a restaurant, but as soon as you sat down, there was a magic bubble that came around your table, and then you could eat. And it all became about power. It took a while until people were saying, hey, this isn't about keeping people safe. This is just because you like telling people what to do.
When you sit with all that now, it does make you pause. Not necessarily to question everything, but to notice it. How quickly we adjusted. How quickly it all became normal. And maybe that's part of Kenny's point. Not to hold on to fear, but to remember. Because remembering is how we make sense of what we lived through. And then there's the part that wasn't confusing at all. It was just hard. We'll be right back. Today's Change Happens story is sponsored by Pure Energy Apothecary. Owner Don Lancaster and I are friends, and honestly, that matters. It's how I know how much care goes into what she makes. Dawn doesn't create products just to sell them. She makes them because she uses them and cares about how they support real people like you. Her magnesium butter has become a staple in my daily life when my muscles feel tired, when my legs won't settle at night, or when my nervous nervous system feels like it's been running on overdrive, which, let's be honest, a lot of us can relate to. Magnesium supports muscle relaxation, helps with sleep, and eases that wired but tired feeling. This butter is creamy and absorbs right into the skin. No heaviness, no overpowering scent, just comfort. For me, it's not just relief. It's a small ritual that tells my body it's safe to slow down. If you're craving that kind of support, visit pureenergyvt.com and use code PURECHANGE to get your 20% off. Now, back to Kenny's story.
My father also passed away during this period of time. He died for a multitude of reasons, but he had COVID when he died, so he died of COVID. Maybe we shouldn't talk about that because, oh, by the way, the medical people could charge 3 times as much to Medicare if you had COVID. There was disruptions everywhere you wanted to look. Elective surgeries were not being scheduled because you couldn't get that knee replacement. You couldn't get whatever Simon says you couldn't get because the medical people were so freaked out that there could be a rush on medical services, nursing homes or assisted living. You can't go visit grandma except through a window. Super sad things like that were happening.
This is where I think the story changed a little, because beyond the rules, beyond the restrictions, there was loss. People watching loved ones slip away through screens, through phone calls, through distance, not being able to sit beside them, not being able to say goodbye. Funerals were delayed, closure postponed, or never fully found. Kenny and I talked about this for a while because it felt like it mattered. And then the conversation moves forward to something we're all still trying to understand. The impact. Schools shutting down, routines disappearing, an entire generation experiencing the world differently. And somewhere in all of that, I asked him, what do you think this was all for?
On a personal level, I would say that the pandemic sharpened our sense of what was most important to us. You could look at your priorities in life. So in those early days, we were shocked. You still, in that grieving process, I think there's a shock period where you just can't believe that it's happening. Things are happening so quickly that you start just barely being able to adjust to it. Employment being one, your schedules where you can, so much of what you're doing. I guess I want people to remember. I want people to tell their personal stories and think about what they went through and how they can prepare themselves for when it happens again, because it will. Did people go overboard? Well, that's a personal opinion or not, but it happened so quickly. And you have to ask yourself, why? Is it simply because of the fact that people wanted to be seen as doing something? Maybe that would be it. But not thinking about it, what's that going to do to you? If something bad happens in your life and you just let it fester.
I don't know how much of it we will ever fully understand, but I do know this. It changed us, individually and collectively, in ways we're probably still uncovering. For a moment in time, the entire world was living the same story, and that doesn't happen very often. But even in something that heavy, sometimes people find a way to look for the light. Kenny did.
The freeways emptied in Seattle land, so as a tradesman, you're constantly going from one project to the other. So that was nice. That was about the only good thing about the pandemic was that the commuting times dropped significantly.
That may sound simple, but maybe it's the point. Because even in the middle of uncertainty, there were moments of clarity. We slowed down. We noticed things. We learned what mattered. And in some ways, even while we were being kept apart, we found new ways to stay connected. And somewhere in all of that, Kenny was writing a story about classic cars and pinup culture, and then, unexpectedly, a COVID love story, pulling from his own experiences and shaping them into something that felt a little lighter, without ignoring what was happening underneath. I read the book, Classic Cars and Pinup Dolls, and it's fun, full of characters with names you don't forget and moments that make you smile. But at its core, it's still about the same thing: how quickly life can change, and what we do when it does. After all of that, after a life of service and a way of finding humor even in the hardest moments, I asked Kenny what makes him smile today.
Well, my fiance.
You win.
That's the right answer. I'm a pet parent, so I like terrorizing the cats. I don't actually terrorize them. I like my cats. They bring life into my world. I love the fact that baseball season is about ready to start. Everything is better.
That makes sense. He did find love after all. And somehow, I never even asked how they met. Before we wrapped up, I asked him to leave you with a little wisdom. In true Kenny fashion, he won't disappoint.
Compared to the wisdom of the creator of the universe, that man's wisdom wouldn't even fill the belly button of a bumblebee. But I personally am not wise. I've been on this earth for 57 years. Compared to larger time frames, it's not very long. I'd say don't spit in the wind. Don't be afraid of the tax man. I would say always file your taxes. You don't have to have the right number. You just got to turn in your homework.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Kenny's story isn't just his. It's ours. We lived it, we all felt it, and we carry it in different ways. And maybe his question, why don't we talk about it anymore, isn't really about having all the answers. Maybe it's just a reminder to stay curious, to keep remembering, to not move past something that changed us without at least trying to understand it. And also not getting stuck in it. Because if Kenny shows us anything, it's that even in the middle of it all, there's still room for humor. Still room to notice what matters. Still room to find something good, even if it's just a little lighter traffic on the freeway. And maybe that's the balance. We remember, we reflect, we keep asking questions, and somewhere in between, we keep living. Because even now, we're still in the then what, and maybe that's where the meaning is. And now for the What Changed Me community drawing information. Head to changehappenedpodcast.com. Click on the What Changed Me banner to tell us what stayed with you from today's episode or any interview episode you listen to as part of the What Changed Me community drawing. Each time you share, you'll be entered into a Change Happened drawing. You can enter more than once. Every entry is also automatically included into our quarterly drawing for a special Change Happened Super Prize, whether you've won before or not. Change doesn't end the story. It's often where the next chapter begins. If something in today's episode stayed with you, a moment, a sentence, a feeling, I'd love to hear about it. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, consider sharing this episode with them, because these stories don't end where the episode does. They keep moving forward in what we carry with us and in who we pass them on to. Change Happened, Then What is written, edited, and produced by me, Heather Holt, with the loyal background support from my two sidekicks, Waylon and Dalton. Until next time, keep smiling and maybe let your dog inspire your next big idea.